already, and so maybe you can say what they are and just go on. Okay.
I'm Lieutenant White. I actually am the lieutenant for the night shift, and I work everything from 41st Street South, basically, is my responsibility on the night shift. We also have a day lieutenant for that area, as well as a day and night lieutenant for the north sector. So all of those areas have individuals that cover them. This is Sergeant Crocker. He's the sergeant for the South End Nights. That flips because they do the shifts go back and forth. So there's also another sergeant for nights south. We came here, I wanted to address some of the questions that apparently had come up last month. So I'm going to go through those first, and if anybody has additional questions, we can go over that as well. There were some questions asked about the drive-by shooting on 98th Place Southwest that was on the 13th, and whether or not that there's concern about like what colors your kids wear or those types of things. That drive-by shooting that involved a house and no injuries, there was some affiliation between the shooters or the alleged shooters and the individuals that reside there or frequent there. So that wasn't just a random act where an individual was out shooting up any house. That was an act that actually had some affiliation with each other. So as far as a random individual, that's not what they were after. It was certainly something where there was an initial argument. A lot of the stuff that we talk about, if it's an ongoing investigation, I can't give you a lot of details about it. I simply can, I can answer your questions, but in a general sense, was that random? No, that was not a random act. There was also some concern about a woman who parks her car on Holly, doesn't want to leave, doesn't want services. We have contacted her. We are familiar with the
I've met her several times personally.
That you're talking about, and apparently there was some concern that parking enforcement doesn't want to do anything, or that the police department doesn't want to do anything, which is not exactly correct. We have to work within the laws, and if the woman doesn't want services and she's not doing anything illegal, there's not going to be much that we can do other than contact her, offer her services, or ask her to move along. What we do have to work with is the 72-hour parking ordinance, so if her car is there for more than 72 hours without moving, then it gets red tagged and can be towed. But as long as she moves the vehicle, that does not apply. So one thing that you guys can do if you feel that area should be a no parking anytime tow away zone, you could ask for that, but that really is kind of one of those things that there is no law that says only residents can park here, somebody else can't. So you have it one way or the other, and I think it might be very detrimental to your neighborhood if you don't want anybody to park there at all. So unfortunately, even though she doesn't want services, she is there frequently, there's not going to be a lot we can do as far as her parking there. Now, if she's doing something that would indicate to you that she's selling drugs, that she's interacting with people on a criminal level, call 911. When it's occurring, let us know, and we'll come out there. Because if we can make contact with her or we can see her doing something that's enforceable, that's where we can take action. But we do have to work within the parameters of the law. We can't just tell her to leave if it's a place that people can park. The other one was the shooting that occurred in your area with a young gentleman. And the questions that were posed there was why that we had stated, or the police department had stated, this was a gang-affiliated incident. That's because, and the point was that the boy that was the victim in that was not a gang member. He didn't need to be a gang member. When we say gang-affiliated, it means that there's something about that incident that's tied to the gang culture or people that are knowingly in gangs. So it doesn't mean that that individual themselves is a member of a specific gang. It didn't have anything to do with the color shoes he was wearing, which was a question that came up. It was basically affiliations. Then, and I'm going to read through these questions so everybody's on the same page because I'm not sure who was here that asked the questions. It says, we want to understand why the police say it was gang related. Does anybody have any questions about why that would be? Players involved in that are gang affiliated. So
and if I can jump in on that, Lieutenant, we have a bunch of several smaller factions of gangs in South Everett, and they have various different monikers, and there may be anywhere from 2 to 20 members in any one of these individual gangs. And they're subsets of the larger gangs that we all hear about on the street, the Crips, the Bloods, MS-13, these national gangs. They trickle down to the smaller little sects, and there might be kids in the same neighborhood, 5 of them belong to one gang, 5 belong to another gang, and they're subsets of these national gangs. But this is on a very small level. Typically in Everett, in South Everett, our gangsters, for lack of a better term, are ranging anywhere from 11 to 17 years old. We're dealing with kids, and they're subject to the juvenile justice system, which gives us as police and the system itself very limited abilities in what we can do to stop that. It's not illegal to be in a gang at this point. To claim gang membership doesn't make you a criminal automatically, even though that gangs exist typically for the purpose of engaging in criminal activity. It doesn't make you a criminal, which is kind of circular thinking. In this particular case, the victim was known to the suspect. The suspect is a confirmed gang member. He's in custody. He was arrested that night, by the way. The victim is an associate. In fact, his best friend, who was interviewed the next day, claims the victim is a gang member. Even though his father claimed he wasn't, family members claimed he wasn't, his best friend says, oh yeah, he's banging with us. That's the street term for they're out doing things. He's running with the gang. He had not been confirmed in our system as being a gang member. It takes more than just one person claiming that you're in a gang for us to actually assign you into that category. But you know, there's that saying, if it looks like a duck and it sounds like a duck, he's associating with gang members. His best friend says he's a gang member. People in the community or in the school knew this shooting was going to occur. There was friction between those two people, those two particular people. The suspect had it in for the victim, and a lot of people knew about it, and they knew it was coming. So it wasn't really, you know, the word didn't get to us, but the word in the various cliques was, yes, he is out to get him because of the gang association. So that's why we, as police, this has all the colors of, you know, for lack of a better term, of being a gang-related issue. It wasn't a random shooting. This person wasn't targeted because he's wearing particular color shoes. He just was targeted because he was in a rival gang or believed to be in a rival gang.
And that's the important part for the neighborhoods, is that it wasn't random. Okay, this is something where there was an attachment that that made it more likely that that individual was going to be contacted by the suspect. The other part is, and it did say, do we need to be concerned what color of shoes our kids are wearing? It's not necessarily the color of shoes, and I'm guessing that was a question about gang colors. And that is correct. A lot of times those identifying things are bandanas of specific color, clothing of certain colors, baseball caps of certain colors, but a lot of times it's all those combined. I'm not concerned at all if my son is wearing blue shoes. I would be extremely concerned if my son had a blue baseball cap on backwards, a blue bandana hanging out of his pocket, wearing blue shoes with maybe some blue shoelaces tied or whatever. I'd be a little concerned. And the behaviors, that's a huge thing to watch for. Behaviors. We're not out there looking to see who's wearing what color shoes, but we do watch for behaviors. It's important that we note who's hanging around with who, what kinds of things they're involved in. So as far as what color shoes your kids choose, that's not going to be the issue. It's a totality thing. So, and we want to be aware as neighbors and as parents to those things. And this one, we've been told that the shooter has some mental issues and was involved in vandalism at Explorer. Why did the school district not press charges, as it would have allowed the child to get the help he needs? Just like any one of you, victims have the right to choose if they want to be a victim or not. We can't, as the police department or the government, force someone to be a victim or choose how they deal with being a victim of crime. We give guidelines and we tell them what's available to them within the parameters, but we don't get to choose. So that wouldn't be a question that I could answer because I don't necessarily work for the school district. But that was a choice that they made at the time, and we cannot force someone to be a victim.
Another issue on that front is that the suspect in this case, we didn't have a lot of history. We were told, and through multiple sources have confirmed, he was somewhat developmentally delayed, but cognitively he was, you know, fully aware and fully capable of understanding what he was doing. But they say maybe he just didn't process information very quickly. It wasn't a normal cognitive issue. But the juvenile justice system, like I said before, is very frustrating. that he was involved in the vandalism at the school several weeks earlier, that's not enough to get him arrested. We had so little history with him. What's that?
That is confirmed that he was one of.
I believe so. Yeah, he was associated with that. I don't know that he was arrested at that time, but he was contacted for that time. But in order for police to book a person into juvenile justice center, it requires either extenuating circumstances of violence or threat to an individual or property, I guess, potentially. Even though I don't know that they would make that exception. Or there has to be points. Kids get points built up by committing and being convicted of crimes. Once they reach a certain number of points, then they're eligible for booking. So this particular person didn't have a lot of contact with the police. At the time of the shooting, he was a runaway. So he was living in the woods. He was transient. He had been reported as a runaway, living with his grandmother, and hadn't returned home. So we didn't have a lot of history with him, but again, even though we had been arrested in association with vandalism, a property crime is not going to get somebody booked into jail, a juvenile. I could potentially book an adult into jail, provided they weren't under the influence of narcotics, because if it's a misdemeanor, they probably wouldn't take them to jail for that either. But it's a frustration from our point as police officers that we don't have a lot of other recourse. So we get this kid in the middle of the night at 1 in the morning who just broke into the school and committed a bunch of vandalism.
So you can release the kid?
What's
so
that?
You can release the kid?
We release him to a parent or guardian. That's pretty much what we do. And if we can't locate a parent or guardian, we have to find a secure facility or call CPS and place him into CPS custody. Because the kid jail won't take him.
But doesn't matter if he's doing something bad to other kids?
They have to have reached a certain amount of points. And
They have
so,
to do a lot of bad things.
And
in order to
understand
get
that
into
there's
jail.
different entities. Okay, we have the police department, and we do go out when 911 is called, and then we make a decision on what we need to do. But we also have those detention facilities, that's Snohomish County Jail and the Juvenile Justice Center. They have their own guidelines and parameters. So let's say that we've arrested a youth that has done something bad, as you said, but they don't have enough points for them to meet their system criteria. Then we're going to need to contact an adult to release them to. What he was talking about is that they have a score sheet. So if a young person that's under the age of 18 has committed crimes that they maybe haven't been booked on, they get a certain amount of points on this score sheet for each thing they've done. So if they committed, say, a vandalism that didn't meet the criteria for them to be booked, they may have a couple of points from that. If they've done that multiple times, they may have enough points that if they do it again, then they will take them. So we will always check to see if they're going to take the individual that we have in custody, even if it appears to be something they may not take, because there's still that possibility that the child has accumulated enough points to go in. Does that make sense to you? Okay. And then some of the important things for you guys to remember is if you see things occurring, please call 911. If you have something you want to report that's not currently going on, and it's not an emergency necessarily, but you want us to know, there is the non-emergency number. Do your members all have that number?
They can, and they will.
Okay.
Can you also call 911 and just say non-emergency?
That's exactly, you can do that, and you'll get transferred over to this. It's a 425 number, and it's 407-3999, and that's for non-emergency reporting. Also, crime mapping is available to everyone, so you can get online with the City of Everett's website and look at crime mapping to see what's going on in your area. You don't necessarily have to wait until the monthly meeting happens. And the officer's here to tell you what's going on. It's right there, and it's pretty up to date. For the most part, the only time that it's delayed is maybe a day or two when they are updating the system for memory and storage things. And then, and that's under community crime map in there, so you can take a look at that. Also, if there's issues, and I know that we're coming into that tail end of the election season, so if you're having issues with the political signs or something's going on where that's code enforcement, that number is also available on the city's website, or I can provide it to you. And then there's when we go back to that gang issue, graffiti is one of the things that we see from some of the individuals that want to claim these different subsets that he was talking about. And so when that graffiti comes up, one of our best, there's a graffiti hotline, and residential homeowners can get assistance with getting that removed, because we want to remove it as quickly as possible to not allow them to take any traction in what they're doing. So I don't know if you have anything more on the graffiti stuff. but-
No, it's just good intel, because the gang graffiti is how they define their territory. It's how we know who's active. We can identify certain individuals through their tags. So we actually have a detective that actually works with taggers in the graffiti side, and he has a list of, the specific monikers that a lot of these taggers are used. So a lot of times he can look at it and go, oh yeah, I know that's so-and-so because that's their tag.
The symbols also.
The symbols, yeah. So anytime you find it, rather than just cover it up, it's a good idea to call us. We can come out, take pictures of it, document it. So at least that goes into our intelligence unit, and they can tell, oh, so-and-so's active, or this gang's moving into this new area. There's something else going on. It keeps our intelligence group up to date. Yep.
So I've gotten conflicting information on this a couple of times.
Okay.
My understanding is that the code enforcement takes pictures and shares it with the police department, that we don't need to call 2 numbers.
Code enforcement does take pictures and they share it with the police department, but what they do is they send it directly to Intel, which doesn't necessarily, so you're getting the correct answer, but it may not be as all-encompassing as what you see in your mind, because code enforcement will take those pictures, but they ship that directly to the Intel unit, which means that our patrol officers who work the road every day may not see that information until it comes back out in a crime bulletin. Yeah. So the best real-time way to do it is if our patrol officers get those, because then they do what's called a recap on it, and they let all the officers in patrol know what graffiti was found where.
So if there's graffiti that's been there for a while, don't worry about that. But if I see new graffiti pop up that wasn't there yesterday but is there today, it would be a good idea to call them on it.
Yep.
Yes. The other thing you can do, if you contact code enforcement, ask them specifically to put it out to patrol.
Okay, because they don't ever answer their phones.
They are a very busy unit, and so I do know that it is difficult to get more than just a call back on a message left. So I would honestly say your best avenue on new graffiti is to contact 911 and let them know so that we can get that information to patrol. Does anybody have any other questions about the stuff from previous that we haven't covered yet?
So I was just curious about, because you mentioned that this young person was reported to have developmental delay, and that makes me think about the partnership with the school district. Because students with disabilities, they can access a lot of services in school when they're properly identified and whatnot. So I guess I have 2 questions. So would you know, how much do you know about, like, when, I just want to say youth get identified with disabilities, and that potential way to access services? And then I guess my other question is, like, what does the partnership with the school district look like?
Our partnership with the school district is very good. We have an actual unit that's assigned to the schools. There's a Sergeant Reeves, that's in charge of that school unit. The schools have officers that are very involved with the kids. And in fact, when that shooting occurred, the school resource officer who was assigned to those kids was there talking to them, trying to sort out with the witnesses as well as victims' friends, and just sort out what happened. And that's why we got as much information as we did, as quickly as we did, from what was known at the school district, because he was already over meeting with them regarding the threats that they were aware of, so that they could liaison, so everything came together much more quickly. So that relationship is very good. As far as the coordination of us knowing who or who does not get connected to resources for disabilities, we wouldn't know that, because that's a HIPAA issue. It wouldn't necessarily be shared with us. And so even though the school districts may have that information, the only information we would have is that which is available to our officers who are embedded in the schools.
And to further that, there are services, I'm sure, available through the school district, and they have, they can identify what the issues are mentally or developmentally.
Yeah.
But in this case, a student, he was a runaway. He hadn't been to school in months. So the SRO assigned to the school that he had been at knew his name and knew him and had talked to him before, and knew he was quote unquote at risk. But when he's a runaway, he ran away from his grandparents' house several times, wasn't going to school. It's tough to connect with service student school when they're not there. So.
All right, does that thoroughly answer your question? Okay. Does anybody else have questions regarding any of it?
I do. So it sounds like there were a lot of people that knew that this thing was going to happen. but nobody said a single thing, is that just a filter?
I wouldn't say a lot, but there was a handful of individuals who knew that this kid was angry about some stuff, was angry with the other kid. As far as what was specifically said by him, a lot of that was found out after the fact, but there were a handful of individuals that knew that he was looking for him. But when we're talking about time frames, I think they knew that like less than an hour before, unfortunately.
Okay.
I don't know, do you know of anything that was more than?
I don't know. I think
I don't.
there's speculation that this shooting was his initiation into the gang. So it may have been planned for some time, but I don't know if this particular target was planned or if it was a target of opportunity and it just came up that afternoon that there was some other beef between them. But yeah, there were students, when he made the threat or made statements that he was going to do what he did, there were students around that heard that and they brought that to the administrator of the school. That's why our SRO was actually meeting with them. And so things happen fast. He made the statement, he went and found the guy and shot him. It happened real quick.
So, and anything beyond that for us is kind of a speculatory thing, and because it is still an ongoing case, you know, the sergeant and I, we don't delve into that case. That's in our detectives' hands. They do all of that, and we wouldn't be able to release the information anyway until it becomes public disclosure, and then anybody in the room could get it by simply filing for it. More questions?
I'm curious what we're looking at.
I'll tell you about it's our
South Everett.
neighborhood.
This is where I drive around all night.
Yeah, it's our
Not
neighborhood.
looking at dating
Yeah.
places or anything.
Oh, no,
It's
no.
What do you do when it's a car that you see a car like parking and kind of it's weird? Because I live by 100th Street and Montana Road,
Yep.
by the Walton Homes.
Yep.
There is a truck there, not a car, but it's like a camping. I just saw
Was it on there?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
if,
what I would say is I tell people all the time.
It's
I tell everybody, if you ever have a question, call 911. That's what we're here for. That's why you pay taxes. That's why I have a job. If you see something suspicious that seems wrong,
yeah,
you
it's
call us.
every day. I work in a school.
Yeah?
And every time I take the bus from the school to my house, and every time that it comes by 100th Street,
It's there.
it's there. And it's
Well,
like,
and again, as a patrol officer, and I spent my whole career as a patrol officer, and I worked on our anti-crime team a little bit, but what I always tell people is that if you see something, make the call. If it turns out that it's nothing, no big deal. I mean, if it's not a high priority, if it's a suspicious car that's parked there, I may not get to it right now, because if we're busy, I'm going to things that are happening right now. All my officers right now are responding to calls, and, you know, they're prioritized. And a suspicious car is down the list. But once we get done with all these other calls, we're going to go to it. We go to every single 911 call. If you call, there's an officer either going to call you or they're going to go and check out what you called in. If it turns out it's nothing, or it's just a parking issue, or it's something that we don't have any in jurisdiction over, okay, no big deal. If it turns out that it is something that we can do something about, maybe we can go to the car and there's someone in it. And we find out, hey, how you doing today? We talk to him, he's got a warrant. Or we see drug paraphernalia. You know, maybe we can make an arrest there. We just don't know, but if you don't call us, we never go.
A couple times I saw a guy coming out from that car, but he was with a dog, and he just pulled out the dog, and the dog did things, her dog, and he didn't even pick it up, nothing, and then went inside again.
and you can contact us on that, you know, because you do have to pick up the poop. You can contact the police department, call 911.